Hi, Rob Snow at Rob Art Illustration. Just wanted to pop in and give a quick introduction to this artwork. It was an interesting idea from a client to do a parody of the famous George Washington Crossing the Delaware image. You'll see what they wanted is change it slightly. Now, the commission didn't finish, but I wanted to finish the painting, so I just wanted to go through the process with you, just show you what I did. This is part one. There's two parts because it took so long to do it. There's lots of detail and everything, so I just do a little commentary through it so you can get some idea of what I did and how it works and everything. Okay, so what I want to do is just go through the file and show you what I did and painted and etc. I tend to use the same brush. You'll see I'm using a different brush than my normal one at the start, and then I just quickly swap over because I basically find it easier to use the brush I always use, which is the top one in that panel. I just find it gives a kind of a nice painty feel, and this is an oil painting, so I'm replicating an oil painting, so I basically wanted to use a brush to give that feel. Sometimes it can be difficult, and sometimes it makes a really nice effect. Doing the clouds was one of the hard parts actually, and it's at the start. I tend to start with the foreground, but in this occasion the client hadn't decided what they wanted me to do with the foreground regarding all the different people. I know they wanted the liberty as it stands, but all the other ones were going to be changing maybe, and we had to wait for this to happen. And eventually the client declined the project because they didn't want it to be a replica of the original painting. Instead they wanted to have a parody version. Nevertheless, I decided to carry on painting it because I wanted to test myself. I wanted to see how good I was at doing a good piece of artwork. And to date, this is probably one of my most detailed and precise pieces I've done, even though it's a kind of a copy of an original. It does have original parts to it. And so I carried on painting. Now, when you do a painting for a client or on a commission, you tend to have a kind of a time scale that you feel that's going to be done by. I put in mind this was going to take me 21 days, not counting for weekends, so it's basically 15 painting days. Now this kind of was a bit of an underestimation actually. I ended up finding out this is my 11th day painting on this, and you'll see at the end of it I still have all the interiors to do. So in some respects it was a bit of an underestimation, but one thing I found is that drawing it has actually made me concentrate and look into the detailing a little bit better. Maybe because I have to have a kind of an exactation of the original. I don't know, but I wanted to try and get it as close as possible to the original. What you can't do is you can't see the actual original reference file I have slightly above this one. It's on the second monitor, but what I'm doing is constantly referring to it, and from that point on I can actually then try to get the detailing as close as possible. I wasn't looking for an exact copy. I would have done a different process. If I wanted to do an exact copy, I would have actually put the reference image over the top and slowly built up everything by tracing it via onion skin method. This was just like an exactation. It wasn't supposed to be exactly the same, but it was enough to, when you pull back and had a look at it from a distance, it should look like the original, and I think I've achieved it. Now, in this overestimation of the timescale, one of the points that did become a problem was the ice. I thought it was going to take maybe a couple of days maximum, and it did take over 4 days to do all the ice. And you'll notice towards the end of this video that the foreground ice was actually taking up a day per ice cube, which was very frustrating. But I wanted to get it looking very realistic and detailed next to the original one. But this is like what I'm doing here at the moment. You'll see it just takes lots of time because it's got lots of little fiddly detail bits. Every little tweak and twerk of the brush has to make a brush stroke, and that's what takes the time, not the fact that it's time consuming for any other reason. But I wanted to do it, like I said, to get the detailing, and it was proving to be good. Now, I don't know how long it took the original painter to do the painting, but as I said, this is for 11 days so far. I evaluate it on a level that basically is necessary to get the kind of quality that the client's looking for. But saying that, I'm sure the client doesn't have a real concern for the detailing, and that's the big issue. I could have probably done it a lot simpler and quicker, but at the end of the day, as an artist, you would look back and say, I want to put the best effort in as possible. And the closer you get towards the foreground, the bigger the objects get, the more detail you want to put in and the more realistic you want to make it, like this part I'm doing at the moment. It shows that it has a little bit more interest in it. So it's something you could actually zoom in and look at, and you want it to make it look like it so it can hold itself if somebody did zoom in and look at it. Whereas all the background ice, it's roughly patterning, but the big issue with the ice was it had so many different colour variations in the actual painting that I wanted to keep sampling it. And you probably notice on the layer panel it just keeps jumping backwards and forwards between the reference one and the actual painted version. That's because I'm sampling a new colour from it. And so what we need to do is obviously give that kind of realism in the actual painting, not just by painting one colour and then just giving lots of little white spots on it, but to actually sample all the necessary colours. And you can basically, you maybe not be able to see it in this video, but there are, in that one patch that I'm doing there's maybe 4 or 5 different blues that are being used that have to be sampled to get the right colour and then put in. But every piece of ice I'm doing has that same process, has more than 1 or 2 colours in it. So to make it look realistic and good next to the original one, you have to spend the time sampling it and doing it another way. Lots of other artists probably have a palette, a swatch palette, and they'll probably just sample the colours onto that and then just keep choosing from it. I like to go from the original one as I'm painting. Sometimes I have the painting actually sectioned onto the actual canvas I'm painting on, so I can just literally bounce backwards and forwards, but I wanted to keep this fresh and open, so I'm jumping between windows. Sometimes, like now, you'll notice I forget doing the actual detail part and just do some what's known as blocking in. This is because, you know, the amount of time it takes to do these kind of artworks is you get a little bit tedious and bored of it, and so you just avoid doing major areas because you just don't want to be bothered painting over and over again very detailed, highly detailed things. And this is a good thing, it needs to be pointed out at this point. Art like this, well, most art anyway, whether it's digital or actually hand painted, it takes a lot of physical energy. A lot of people don't realise that. They think you just sit here, wave your hand around and it just basically is painted. It doesn't. You have to concentrate, you have to get your body in a certain posture to be able to paint properly, and it's constant energy being pushed into it to make this work. Can you imagine doing all this for 8 hours constantly? It does really tire you out, and so every so often you'll notice I actually bounce from one area to another just to avoid the monotony. That's probably what the best part of saying is. But I'll just leave this to run for a while so you can have a look at me painting the ice, and if it pops into another sequence I'll tell you what I'm doing. I should point out actually, when I'm painting any picture these days, I do it at a very high resolution. This is not even 100%. Most of my canvases are around about 15,000 pixels wide or tall, depending on which is the longest edge, and they come in 300 dpi, so they're able to be printed, which gives them an overall physical size quite high. So this can take up a lot of RAM, can take up a lot of memory and everything, and it can slow the whole process down a little bit. Saying that, I want to give the highest quality possible, and so this is one of the reasons I do that. But it does give the ability with certain brushes, the higher the resolution, physical resolution in pixels, the better the quality the brushes are. So that's one reason I do that. So I basically get to the point where I finish the actual back footage, and what I do is I move on to the actual midground, which includes this section of boats and men sitting in the boats. This was the next stage where you have to concentrate on the detail a little bit more, because obviously these men have a higher detail than the ones in the background, so you have to keep your concentration even harder. And saying that, also the actual detailing of the actual timescale becomes more intense, so you actually take longer to do them. I'm just blocking in here just to get some of the colours, because I didn't want to start, and then I started doing the foreground water because I thought that was a complicated bit, and because of this timescale waiting for the client to get back about these figures, I thought it best to get some of the more complicated bits done, and that's why I concentrated on this bit, because there was a lot of detailing in this. I think I did quite a good job. You know, referencing the original obviously helps. You don't need to think how does the water work when a boat's going through it with icebergs in it, because it's already there in the original. But this is one good thing about referencing. Even if you don't do it from an original painting, you can do it from photographs you can find online. You know, how does a boat move water through water, and what are the colours of the water, and all this kind of stuff. What are the colours like in winter next to summer, you know, all these kind of things. And so, you know, referencing is an important factor in painting. In those days, like when the original one was done, the artist would have gone to maybe a lake or a river, and they would have got somebody to put a boat in, and they would have referenced it by looking at it and using observation skills. Now for us, luckily we have digital cameras, we have photographs available online you can look at and use, and all this kind of stuff, so that makes life a lot easier. But I think I did quite a good job, even just, you know, replicating what the actual original one did. It was a complicated sequence that, you know, that's a whole day doing just that one sequence there with the water. You'll notice here I do start doing this iceberg, and then I give up because I get tired, and I didn't want to do all the splashy water above it, so I moved back to the middle ground and start painting the figures, which have, like I say, more detail in them. And you'll notice the difference being, the more closer you get, the more contrasts change, and so you get more contrast in these faces. If you see the ones in the background, they don't have any contrast at all because there's no detail at all. And you have to have that kind of depth Q tonal value as well, so the softer variations in the light, whereas these are getting differences between light and dark more. And the ones in the foreground will even be more than that, so that's what gives you the impression of distance as well. But I try my best to, like I say, give these kind of realistic looks and feels to these figures, because I wanted to make them look like you could zoom in and go, well, you know, wow, that looks really cool and everything. And I think I've achieved it to some extent. It's not obviously the same exactly like the original one, but I think it works. As I do move across here, I notice that the horses are coming up, and that was one of the things, even before I started painting the picture, that I was a bit worried about. I didn't want to mess the horses up, so you'll notice through the whole painting of the horses I jump back and forwards between all the three horses to just avoid doing them all in one go, because I wanted to have breaks from them. It was very tiring doing the horses, whereas lots of these other parts are quite simple. I don't know why I find certain parts easier than others, but one interesting thing you'll notice about art is, and some people get scared about doing certain kinds of art, whether it's faces or anything that looks semi-realistic, is your brain works in a way that you relate to things. You know, you'll relate to a man sitting on a horse, you'll relate to a man with a cape around his face, you'll relate to a man pulling a rowing oar, all this kind of stuff, so you know when it looks wrong. As I said though, we've got a reference painting here, but if you're doing it on another painting, that's what things would happen in your mind. You have to make it look real, and so you get kind of more concerned about making the effort to do the detailing to make it look that real. This is one thing with a horse, I don't know, it was such an expansive area, and I needed to make sure that I did a good job on it, and I was always concentrating and thinking about it. And as I said, I'll leave this for the time being, I won't talk about it, but you'll notice when I start painting it, I'll jump backwards and forwards from it, and that's because I didn't want to basically mess it up. you'll notice when I actually paint the horse's legs, they change quite a bit in width and shapes and the detailing, because I don't know, I was concerned that they needed to be exact, and this is kind of the frustration I had with the horses over anything else. A great deal of this painting, apart from the humans obviously, is just objects, or live objects like rivers or boats and things like that, and so you'll find that they're just shapes. This is one thing you put in your mind when you're painting. You don't see them as a horse. It has to look like a horse, and so you just see them as a series of shapes which have different colours, and it makes your life a lot easier. And this is one technique some people do. They actually even flip the painting over upside down, so you can actually look at it and you don't see the horse, you just see a series of shapes. Because I'm copying an original painting, just to see as a reference everything, it was easier for me, but even so, because the horse had an expansive area and was more organic, I was more concerned about getting it right and everything. And you'll notice, as I said, I keep jumping away from each of the horses before they're finished, because it was very tiring. Also with these uniforms, a lot of the times the colours didn't sample very well, so I had to re-pick them and change them, and you'll notice the colour sampler comes up, and it's because I was having to find perfect blues and dark hues of blues and things to allow for the uniforms to come in properly, because most of the time they were coming in grey, which was a little bit awkward, because they weren't grey, they were blue. So this is another thing to have this little palette that I have up now. It just allows me to then, if I find that the sample colour I choose doesn't work, I can then just pick one on that palette. You see, I've left the main white horse. I've even you see, I just completely left the face of that middle horse, because I got so stressed about doing it. Whereas, you know, all these objects here, they're not faces or parts of humans, they're just shapes that you see. I even moved to the foreground here to do the interior, and did some more blocking in just to avoid going back to that horse to finish it. But eventually I obviously did do the horse, and you'll see it in a minute. After I complete all this foreground interior, which I was really quite pleased with actually, it looks almost exactly like the original one. But then I go back to the horse. It's basically a case of it's got to get done, so you might as well do it. So by the end of the day, I'm thinking to myself, I'd like to get it finished, and just messing around with other parts doesn't get it finished. So you just have to bite the bullet, as they say, and just get on with it and say, oh, you know, the horse's face has got to get finished. Let's move on to it. Also, you'll probably notice while I'm painting, sometimes I have the pencil outline on, and sometimes I turn it off, and that's because when I'm going to an edge, sometimes the actual black line of the pencil gets in the way and you can't see where the true edge is. So I basically just switch it off quickly so I can see where the true edge is, and then do those highlight points on it and things like this. Now sometimes, like here, I don't know why, there's these two guys in the foreground pushing the boat off the ice, and I get to a certain point where I do their back legs, I do the blocking, but I never finish the actual legs for some reason. I actually attended that on a different day. I don't know why I did that, but I think what I did is I wanted to try and get the legs and that piece of ice done all at the same time, and it kind of like was close to the end of the day, and I just thought I didn't want to really try to achieve that in one day, so I just gave it up for that day. So that's when you'll see me moving on to something else just to quickly finish the day off. Because I tend to set myself a kind of a schedule you know, I say I've got to work for 8 hours, or sometimes I'll even work for 10 because I get stuck into it and I'll just love doing painting, so I just forget about the time. And I say to myself, you know, okay, I don't really want to challenge myself to do that whole block of ice, so I'll block something in quickly whilst I wait for the timer to run out, so I can then do it tomorrow morning. You know, that's the first order of the day, is to do that the next morning. So I've nearly finished the back of the boat, and that's the horse is done, the whole of the middle section done, apart from that block of ice with the guys that use. I'm putting the leggings in, but I don't actually finish them off, I don't think. So I have to tell, because you know this video is all put together in a way that, you know, I actually can point, yeah, this is where I start the next day, and so that's where I decide I've got to finish it off. So I basically get to it and say, oh, you know, it's got to be done. And some of these simple areas where you think are simple areas in the background are actually the more complicated bits, because there's so, if you look at how many streaks are going across those two guys' clothing, it's quite a complicated situation, really. And then you've got to think about, oh, I've got to do the ice on top of that as well to make it look like they're standing in the ice. All in all, the challenge was to get the background finished, and then from the background I'll spend another week doing the foreground, which should be, in some senses, a little bit easier because they're bigger blocks. The clothes are a lot bigger, the area's a lot bigger, so it's going to be a lot easier, and there's not so much detailing like the ice. And we're just at the halfway point here, gone past the halfway point, and you can imagine then I've done more than 50% of the background, but we're still halfway. Yeah, so the complexities of what I've got to do ahead of this point here are based on the fact that the further forward you come, the more detail it is, and the more scrutiny will be put on the detailing that you're putting in, like how the boat looks, for instance. You know, all these planks of wood, they're not just brown. You know, look at all the detail you have to put in to make one plank of wood. Yeah. I don't know, you noticed that I skipped away from that ice again because I was getting frustrated with it, but eventually I got down back to it and started finishing it, which is probably a good thing, really, because when you do complete a section that you're happy with, inside you feel a kind of a sigh of relief, because you know you don't have to bother with it ever again, sort of thing. So then there was the boat, and I think this is coming towards the end of the first day, and I don't complete the whole of the boat panelling, but I just basically wanted to put something in just to get started, so the next day I would know that, you know, I had certain challenge ahead of me. So there's certain features that aren't on the original painting as well, like this speaker is stuck on the edge of the boat, and you have to be aware of the shadowing and things on that as well, so you have extra features that are not on the original one. But it all went smoothly. The boat was quite a nice thing to do, because it looks like an old boat, and the kind of the colour values on the different panels, the planks, was quite interesting to try and recapture. But I think I did a good job. And again, the original artist obviously did a great job. You know, the actual values between the light coming at the start of the boat, where the bow is and everything, is amazing. Just that slight touch of blue-grey, just gives the impression that there's some light reflecting off something. I don't know how they did the referencing, because obviously it wasn't there, but it does give a great, nice effect. It gives a little bit more of a quality to the overall dimension to the painting. This gets a bit awkward when you start doing dark colours next to patches of white, so this is one reason I started filling things in, because you don't know whether you're getting a true colour, because you've actually got a lot of white causing a contrast. Even though I'm sampling things, it looks wrong, because obviously the contrast between the white background and the foreground becomes a bit confusing, so that's a bit of an issue. But we got through it. One thing you could probably do is if you look closely and scrutinise the original one next to this one, you'll see that some of these nail holes that I've made on the planks on the wood are in the wrong place, but I don't think anyone's going to be too bothered by that. See some major blocking in. This is when your life gets a little bit easier and you feel a bit happier, and there's some really kind of large areas of similar colour, so you don't have to worry too much about that. And so, you know, it feels like you're actually achieving something, even though you realise, you know, there's this lump of ice in the foreground, which I'm now blocking in actually, and it's got to be detailed. And I'm looking at it and thinking, oh God, I've got to come back to it one day and do it. But as soon as I got this river in, I felt a little bit happier, because obviously the days are running out, and I think I'm on day 9 here, out of 11. This basically messed up a lot. I had to change it quite a bit. You probably can't see me doing the overlay, but I did do some pulling with one of the options in Photoshop to pull this highlight up, and you probably can't see it because I did it when it was switched off. Again, this is one thing I've learnt over the years of studying art as well as doing art, is you don't need to put too much detail into something. Persistence of your eye actually does switch in, and you actually look at the combination of tones and highlights and everything, and your brain basically fills in the gaps and says, oh look, you know, that's a swooshing river in winter or something like that. And that's how your brain actually makes life a lot easier for you as an artist, because you know that you don't have to do so much to convince the audience that what you're looking at is a boat in a river. Okay, you got some of the details in there, but the thing is the strokes are so broad and quick sometimes that if you looked at them in really close detail, you'd probably think, big mess. This is another issue here again with the white against the back, so I basically filled in that iceberg. Again, there's a DJ box on top of the handrail of the boat, so I had to add some extra shadow that's not in the original one. And we just did some parts of this first iceberg, which had a strange plateau on top of it, so we had to kind of, I had to recreate, so basically it's an interesting effect. I don't know how realistic it is in real life, if it would be like that, but I'm just copying the painting, but I enjoyed doing that iceberg, and you'll see later on it actually does come out quite good. Where some of the other icebergs were just a nightmare. And I feel like I got to the point where I had to do this, finishing up in the middle ground. So I did all this water splashing. This is probably the worst part. If you look at the original, it doesn't look anything like the original, but the thing is I just did enough to make it effective as what it's supposed to represent, and I don't think anyone's going to really stick the original next to the my version and say, oh God, look, that water doesn't look exactly the same. See there's like 15 odd colours in this one piece here, and you have to sample them all and then put all the additional lighting in to make it look like ice been shattered. And here you'll notice I switched the background off. It's because again you have to follow the lines. Sometimes you don't see the lines, so you have to turn the background elements off. It's all to do with blending, because also if you look on the right side of the layer panel, and you'll see that the layer panels are actually getting bigger and bigger and further down. That's because every time I start a new section, I put it on a new layer, then where those two layers join, I have to blend it in together to make it look like it's all part of the same scene. So that's what I'm doing there. So you just hear that's got a blend, so I have to make sure it all fits together. Okay, this is the work I was doing yesterday, one of the icebergs. Lots of colours and details in there that drove me mad. I wanted it to last maybe 3 hours to paint that, but it took me the whole literal day to do this. And it's because there's so many different facets and different shapes and different highlights and different colours. You just have to spend the time and do it slowly and progressively move over. You probably noticed that as well, especially because I started with the background. I've worked right from the top of the background all the way to the foreground of the background, which is a bit ironic, but I consider the boats and details inside the boat as the main object, subject, so everything else is background. And I've moved from the back to the front, and that's just because I can then build it up in layers, so one goes over the top of the other. Got bored of that, so I did the rope. And this is a good point, because it allows you to, to structure your painting in a way that if you make bits like this, where you actually got things over the top of it, the iceberg is a foreground layer, so I can actually see where that jagged edges at the bottom right. I will come along later and actually paint over that to make it blend between the two objects, and that's why you should always put things in foreground elements, like so. But you'll notice again, like I said, I'm moving from top to bottom, from the back to the front. I also noticed, I don't know what you noticed, especially with, you was noticing more with these three icebergs on the last part of this painting, that I move from left to right. I don't know why I do that, I always do. And you notice probably when I started the painting right at the beginning, it's from left to right. I have no clue why I do these things, but maybe it just causes a habit. One of the habits I have is painting in that fashion. So, like when I do a caricature or when I do the humans, I'll probably end up blocking the colours in, but then I'll start with the face, and if the face becomes okay, I'll then move on to the other bits. And this is just how I do it. I do it with my caricatures, and I do it with everything else I paint. I see certain aspects of it more important than others, and that's why it's important to start at those areas, I think. That's the way it works in my mind. Okay, this was the final day, full day anyway. Again, lots of multiple colours on this iceberg. I think I was getting to a point where I didn't really want to be bothered too much sampling that much, so I was copying colours from different parts of the painting. Especially when I was doing dark tones, I was just finding another dark tone on the painting I thought was close enough, and I just copied it instead of taking the exact one from the painting. Certain things I have to copy, like this was all sampled from the original. And this part here was quite a complicated thing to do because it has these slashes down them, and I wanted to make them look almost exactly the same as the original, but I think I did a good job, but it's just not as good as the actual original one. I'm not sure if you can see this, but when I'm painting, sometimes the colours go on really quickly, and that's because I'm actually speeding up my process, because A, maybe it's because I'm tired, B, because I'm wanting to get it finished, or I don't know why, but you'll see sometimes the colours go on really quickly and you just move right across the piece I'm painting at some speed. The speed render is done at exactly the same frame rate, so. And this is a good way of actually, if you analyse the video, it's a good way of seeing how I might work, because you'll see from the start I'm actually sitting there concentrating, and it takes longer to go from point A across to maybe an inch, but then all of a sudden it just goes whooshing straight across. And that's because I'm thinking about how to speed the whole process up, but also as you paint, you find ways to represent the same thing in a quicker way. You're not too concerned about the detail, and like I say, you see shapes, you see objects as patterns and all this kind of stuff, and so you don't worry too much about the overall effects as long as it looks similar to the original, like I said. Whereas when you start the day, you're probably thinking, I've got to make this look as good as it is, and you don't need to worry too much. Okay, this is coming up to the last full day. So this is this morning when I finished it. This is the last iceberg, and I thought this was going to be quick as well. It took me 3 hours to do this one iceberg, plus there's a rope at the end, which is the final thing I did on the back of the boat. Now this went really quite quickly because, as I said, I've realised I just needed to do basic block colours, and there's these little white scratches and patches all over it that join those blocks of colour together, so you don't need to worry too much about the blending of these block colours. And I figured this out on this one iceberg, and that's probably one of the reasons it went a lot quicker. Like I said, 3 hours to do this last one part of the day. Two things I'm concerned about all the way through the painting is the size of the brush and the opacity and the flow of the brush as well. You'll see the opacity and flow at the top of this video on the menu bar. Now I've got to make it so that, you know, my pressure sensitive pen has to be able to also give a slight opacity to it, but also give the solidness. So I reduced the flow and opacity a little bit, just so I can actually do the difference between solid colours like these white streaks, and also then try to blend two colours together. Like any of these colours that you see are being applied as the base colours, they need to have a blending option as well, so they need to flow together. Anyway, back on to the last part of the painting for now, anyway, for part one. Now, doing these little niches and things was a bit time consuming because I wanted to get them almost exactly the same as the original, but I think I did a good job. It was quite quick, this part. I just basically filled it all in as good as possible, and I just broke over the lines there just to give those little lumps, and that's basically the end product, the finished painting. We'll move on to part 2 tomorrow. Thank you for watching the video, and please consider subscribing to my channel, and also press the notification bell so you're aware of when a new video has been uploaded. If you like the video, consider pressing the thumbs up icon, as well as possibly leaving a comment to tell me what you think. Also consider sharing the video on these sites, as well as follow me on these social media channels. Thank you again for watching.